financially like stable without actually like.
But because we're in a country where they'll take care of us like very much no matter what,
It's good to find like
we kind of have like a safety.
you don't want to throw it all the way.
I don't know. I think once you have like a safety net, you can focus on one thing. You know, I think that money was just a thing to get you happy.
One more minute. All right, we're going to wrap up, finish whoever's speaking, and appoint someone in your very small groups to present, what your group thought. So, is there one group that would like to volunteer?
That's not true.
Let's start with the strongly disagree. So, what are the points that you came up with why you strongly disagree with the statement that it is better to be financially successful but not enjoy what you do than be financially poor but really love what you do?
Well, if you don't like what you're doing and you don't have that like energy to actually do the job correctly, so what's the point of actually doing the job that you hate instead of doing the job that you like? Even though you're not financially supported by it, you're still doing something you love, which makes you happy.
All right.
I feel like if you're like unmotivated and like you don't really have like you're just doing being an engineer just because it pays well and you're not actually like a really great engineer, I feel like that's actually like detrimental to the company and like the field that you're in.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go the exact opposite way and come to the agree side. Why is it that you agree with that statement?
Life is all about sacrifices to me personally. And, to have money to be able to provide for your family needs. Because later in the future you have family and you need to be able to support them. That you need money and to be stable, take care of them, or your parents when they're older. You can't be selfish and think that it's not selfish I would say, but like you have to be able to sacrifice your own happiness, but sometimes to be able to provide for your family, especially living in America where it's a capitalist country, money is important. And that's why I think it's important to have a successful job.
Okay. Now, on this side, can you agree with some of the things that were said here?
I think so. I think we said that there's compromises too. Like, you don't have to sacrifice every day, because you have to go work every single day. And you don't want to hate like your life. And maybe if it's not exactly what you love completely, there's always something that you can find that will still give you enough to live. But like you won't hate it. You might enjoy it a little bit.
Okay. Now, I haven't talked to any of the groups here towards the middle. Anyone here like to volunteer what the group discussed? Please.
Well, right, we were discussing how money can't really buy you happiness. So the goal of human life is to be genuinely happy. So it's not that if you're doing so if you're working at a job that you're not really happy with, as you accumulate that money, what are you doing with your life right there? And then once you get that money, that money is so limited. So what are you doing after that? What are you gonna do? So we were confused how poor are we talking about? Starving poor?
Well, here's the question back at you. How poor do you need to be to change your mind? And this is one important thing about the activity, which is see where the discussion is going. Because we had a discussion earlier about language, in which you shared that you feel disconnected from some of these cultural literary books that you wish to have. If there's a lot of interest in that conversation, a lot of people's like, hey, I have that same thing, don't worry about getting to all of these questions. These questions are designed to hit a variety of topics about culture, but if the group is interested in something and wants to pursue it further, you can, if students start asking, well, how about this? Have you thought about this? Let them ask those questions, because again, this isn't a debate. This isn't, oh, we are right and you are wrong. This is, well, what are you thinking? And you'll notice that with most of these activities, only maybe one or two questions have been largely centered here, but there is a large spectrum of beliefs. And this kind of gets to the final question, which I would strongly encourage that y'all ask, have you noticed how there are different perspectives, even from people with similar cultural values? How do you think your cultural heritage can help you shape the future? So the first thing is not a spectrum statement, the first thing is a discussion. What should we do when our values conflict? What do you think? What should we do when our values conflict? And for time, I'm not going to be able to run through everything, but there's prompt follow-ups, and you'll notice that the final spectrum statement is Asian Americans can respect each other and work together to shape the future for the better, even if they have very different opinions on what it means to be Asian American. Strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, or strongly disagree. Please move accordingly. Asian Americans can respect each other and work together to shape the future for the better, even if they have very different opinions on what it means to be Asian American.
So close to finding tables.
I know, these tables are done. With that being said, this last one is somewhat of a rigged question, because I'd be really surprised if anyone was on the strongly disagree. But it ends on this point to show that no matter your spectrum of belief, for the most part, towards the end, by learning what each other are thinking, by discussing the different views, you really understand the community, yourself, your history, and ultimately your future. And that's what this activity is shaped to do. So with that being said, some technical things to keep in mind when you're facilitating. One of them is that some of these groups, their schedule is broken up. That's not such a bad thing because you've got various questions. So if you're running close to lunchtime or running close to entertainment or the college fair or whatever that your schedule might be divided in, what you do is, okay, well, we're going to take a quick break and go to whatever activity that's next. But while you're there, I want to ask you the next question, and I want you to think about it over this time. And when you come back, we'll continue our discussion. So they can mull over some of these questions, and if you think there's one that's like, wow, that's a tough one, maybe send them out with that question and let them think about it and talk to their peers. So with that being said, do you all somewhat understand how this activity works? Do you have any questions, concerns for me? All right. So yeah, please.
So ultimately, are we supposed to come to a conclusion?
The conclusion is that you can understand the various perspectives and not necessarily conflict, but use that to work together and move forward. That's somewhat the ultimate conclusion, that's what the last spectrum statement. Do you believe that despite our cultural differences, we can work together to brighten the future? And you can emphasize that a little bit more and maybe discuss. And actually, many of these questions along the way, these discussion questions, we'll talk about how can we merge these conflicting views? And these are questions that politicians have been working on for decades. We might come up with a brilliant idea, but this is more about a deliberation, listening, active listening, and participation activity, and get their minds thinking about, okay, what's going on in the community, and what can I do now that I know all these different viewpoints? Is there a balance? Should there be a balance? And maybe it will bring up more questions than it answers.
So ultimately, as a facilitator,
Yes?
the conclusion of this workshop would be to tell them what you just said.
Yes. And
So
I can
may-
probably include that in the
So Ron, may I add also, so for each of the workshops, our authors have written goals and objectives. So if you look at this particular workshop, what are the goals and objectives? And maybe you can even assess, did we even achieve that so far by doing what we have just done? So what can, we do want feedback from you to see, what can help improve that. So like the goals and objectives with this one is we want to help participants understand themselves. So the idea of having you to do these kind of like moving back and forth and agree and disagree is kind of like checking your values, right? And then, and obviously we all come with some kind of cultural influences. And I heard earlier someone said, well, I believe in, sacrificing. So obviously there's something happened in that person's family or in their upbringing that shows sacrificing is the ultimate thing to do, regardless, right? And how you could use those, what you have learned, your perspectives to shape. So remember, this is a shape, so to shape your future, right? And then one of the things was practicing communication, active listening, critical thinking, and respect, and I think we did that today. Everyone was very engaged and doing that. And going beyond your comfort zone, to talk about issues. And then also understanding it's not one experience that's better than the rest, that all the perspectives are valuable. So Ron, is there anything you want to elaborate on that part that our facilitators ought to kind of pay attention to?
Due to the time limitation, I wasn't able to go through some of these discussion questions, but I would encourage you in your free time or before the conference when you're preparing to read through some of these and tweak it a little bit if you think it achievable better. This is meant to be a fluid module. These questions are more guides than strict mandatory statements that must be made. And again, depending on the flow of your group, go with it. And if you're not comfortable picking up on that, feel free to go with these guidelines. They'll get you through the day. All right?
So are these questions to be used during the conference center?
Excuse me?
Are these questions? That
Yes, these will be the questions that you will be.
I find them a little bit loaded and weight, like very stereotypical.
Okay.
And that's my objection to it, because
Okay.
it's too stuck, too much stuck, the expectations.
Well, that,
And I think as a facilitator, I would encourage more in-depth answers to those questions.
okay.
Yeah, because I find it's too easy.
Okay.
Too much on the superficial level, and I think we need to encourage the individual participants to go even deeper than that.
Okay.
So I think, Bibi, if, some of the questions that Ron brought up today, those are intended to, so that we could practice this. We definitely encourage you, because you have to also know these are high school students.
Okay?
So, and their maturity is different levels.
Yeah.
We don't want to ask a lot of, questions in the beginning that make them feel intimidated.
Okay.
So we do want to have some questions that are easy. Like the first question on your list is actually like, all Asians take off their shoes, right?
Well, I changed that just to.
Oh, you changed it? I love that question.